Okay, well, I always hope for a day like this in the middle of March to put out the purple martin house. And I know some of you probably don't know what purple martins are, but they're basically a bird that comes up in the warmer months in Indiana to breed and eat, and they return back south at the end of the warmer months. These are the same birds that when you mow a grass, say like on a tractor, and they are swooping in front of you and behind you. Those are normally purple martins or birds that are similar, maybe barn swallows, and they're very distinctive. They make a lot of noise too. Now, I can expect these birds to come here at the end of March, possibly the first week in April. It all depends on the weather. Fortunately, we're usually out of town during that time, so as I talk about putting this house up and the reasons why I do certain things, it's based off of the fact that I'm not going to be here during the time that they're likely to arrive. They've been here when we've gotten back from Florida, and they've not been here, so I don't know what they expect every year. Now, this is a very, very challenging hobby, mainly because you're dealing with basically animals, and there's a lot of unknown factors that play into this particular hobby. I like that for the fact that it's always got me thinking about better ways of doing things. And actually, this house that I'm getting ready to build right now, it's built several different ways to attract several different types of birds, or I guess mainly the purple martin birds. Now, the goal of this hobby is to actually have your house completely full of birds and keep the birds safe and having a successful breeding season every year. And the goal of filling the house comes directly from the birds from the previous year, and if they're satisfied with the way the house is and the safety of the home. So, like I said earlier, there's a lot of important factors, including where the house is even located on the property. They like to be around people, and they don't like to be around tall trees. I do have tall trees, and my house is a little farther away, but like I said, I attracted some last year. The year before that, I attracted none. So the entire year my house sat there with no birds. But the second year I got them, and I'm expecting more this year. A few other things that these birds need are basically a water source and food, along with flying space. So water source, they get a lot of their water from local creeks and streams, ponds, rivers, whatever they can find. I've got a creek to the south side of my property, and I have a creek across the street, plus I have a pond just north of me. I'm assuming that's probably where they get their water source. When it comes to food, they eat on the wing, which means they fly in the air, eating basically mosquitoes, dragonflies, butterflies, whatever they can find as they're flying. You'll never find a purple martin on the ground eating worms or insects from the ground. Everything's done while flying. Final part is that open flying space. They need to have room to enter and exit their houses at a pretty good speed. They come in pretty hot, so not only that, but they need to have room to be able to avoid predators as they enter and exit the house also. Plus, the flying room is for the mosquitoes, and the butterflies, basically their food source. If you have all those things, usually you're going to be a pretty successful landlord when it comes to purple martins. So let's talk about my house. I've had the house since I've started the hobby, about 10 years. I bought it all new. Can't remember where I got it from, maybe Purple Martin Conservation Association or something like that online. But it's a Lone Star stacked house along with 8 gourds is what I'm beginning ready to put up. The pole, I can't remember the manufacturer. If I remember any of the manufacturers, I'll put links in the description. But it's basically, I think it's a 16-foot pole. I got 3 foot in the ground. I think the house sits about 12 foot above the ground. The first thing you see me doing right now is spraying the pole in the Pulley system with WD-40. Definitely don't want any rust in those particular areas. Try to do that in the fall, and I also do it in the spring. And I'll do it throughout the year too, every once in a while, just to keep everything mechanically working fine. Now, this house is a 2-part. There's a bottom part that has basically the housing that actually makes the house go up and down the pole, and it also connects the poles to the gourds. The hardest part of this whole project is dealing with this wire that's hooked to the crank pulley. You've got to weed it through the house twice and then the top of the pole, and it's just a pain in the, you know. I keep all these houses and gourds and poles all in the garage or attic of my house, just to kind of keep them from the weather. They're only up on the pole for about 4 or 5 months a year or so. When the season's over, that's usually when I take it all apart and store it for the winter. So now that I got the wire ran through the 2 portions of the house, I have to take the same wire and go to the top of the pole where there's a pulley up there, a little wheel I guess you would call it. I have to fish it through that. And then the difficult part is to lift this pole up. It doesn't look like much on video. It's pretty heavy, and it's, you know, when I get the very base of it like I am now, the top is real wobbly. I gotta be real careful here, make sure I make the connection to the lower portion of the pole without damaging the house. The house is aluminum, so it's extremely soft metal, mainly to keep it light. But after I wiggled a little bit, it kind of dropped in. And the whole idea then is also to have that wire still going through the pulley at the top and coming down where I have to then eventually fish it back through the homes once again. You can see how much of a pain this is trying to get this wire through those homes. The pole's pretty tight between when it goes in between the homes there, so there's not a whole lot of room to wiggle that wire down through there. So it took me a good 10 minutes to knock this out. Honestly, you know, I've talked about the different types of homes I got here briefly, but the houses and the gourds, I honestly think this might be my last year for my house. I feel like the gourds really do well for the purple martins in this area. I want to give them more options, and I'll show you some of the options I have in those home compartments here in a second. But this house is hard to deal with, and if I just had gourds, maybe twice as many gourds, it'd be a lot easier. And like I said, the birds seem to like the gourds anyways, so I'll get into the reasons why here in a minute. So I finally got that thing wiggled through, and now I'm starting to attach the arms that actually support the gourd homes out underneath the home. They basically just screw into the steel pockets, and then there's a set screw underneath, bolt and nut that you tighten down. You'll also see here where I'm bringing in the wire now from the top, the pulley wire. You can see where it comes in between the homes. There's a set screw right there where my hands are at, and what I need to do is connect the loop to that area. That way, when I crank the winch up, the house will go up to the top, and then it sits at the top. Like I said, I think the pole sits about 16 feet in the air. Reason why is one, for predators, raccoons, snakes, squirrels. The higher you go, the less chance that you'll have of those types of animals getting into the house. They like the babies is what they like, or the eggs. So if we can prevent that by keeping the house up high, that's a bonus for sure. A couple other predators they may have too, well they do have, are flying predators. Hawks and owls are notorious, killing purple martins. They do a good job of defending themselves. Like I said, they're pretty good flyers, and they fly in packs. But once again, all those predators I got to keep an eye out for, and there's things on this home that are designed to keep those particular predators out of the compartments or the gourds. So what I did here is I simply just raised the house. There's a hole through the pole right there that allows me to slide a screwdriver into the hole, and that allows the house just to be suspended higher up so I can work underneath it. It's kind of important when I'm tightening on all those bolts and nuts. So now I got the house done. I'm now attaching the gourds. You can see what I'm using here. I've got like a 12 gauge or 10 gauge wire that I use that I just wrap along the wire that's already connected to the poles. It does a really good job of keeping the gourds in place. There's no way the gourd will fall off unless the whole line breaks, which is more likely than the wire I'm using right now to attach it. One of the biggest reasons why the purple martins like the gourds is because they bounce, they sway, they swing, and it's pretty natural for them. They actually, back in their native days where they were living on their own for the most part, natural gourds would be this way. So we're just basically mimicking what they used to live in when people didn't assist them in their living. Purple martins are pretty much dependent on people nowadays. They have to have people to survive. Don't get me wrong, they can still find homes in the wilderness. It's just not likely. They kind of know what that, at least what I've been told, they kind of know what that white house is and how it looks, and it attracts these types of birds. Now everything's white in color to reduce the heat within the compartments and gourds. The house is insulated. The gourds are not, but they seem to stay cooler. They're really heavy, dense plastic. Here I am just making the final tightening connections to all the different poles and parts underneath the house. I've got all the gourds attached at this point. Moving along pretty good. You know, outside of what I already said about the gourds are nice. I have two different entrances on those gourds. I can't remember the name. One's croissant entrance, and the other one I can't remember what it's called. Once again, that gives the birds a couple different options. They're shaped in the way they are for the fact that they keep the predators from getting in, especially like starlings, which is a non-native bird. They have long legs, so those entrances that I have on all the homes actually prevent those birds from getting inside. They will kill the purple martins and all their babies too. So, but the gourds have a perch on the outside and a perch in the inside. And then the houses actually have a perch on the outside, and then obviously they don't dip down inside. They basically just walk straight into the compartment home. So two different types of living spaces for the birds to choose from. Just simply testing the pulley system and the winch and making sure everything goes up and down nicely, and it does. So now I'm going to bring the house down and prep all the compartments for the hopefully incoming birds here in the next week or two. So you can see every gourd has a hole to the right side of it, screw off lid. And here we are looking inside. You can see that inside perch there, and you can also see how deep the gourds are underneath the entrance of the door, which the birds seem to like. Now this was last year's, it was never used, so there's not much I need to do this. It already has pine needles inside. That's the material I use for nesting. The birds seem to like that. They'll eventually nest on their own with their own nesting material, such as leaves and stuff like that, but this just gets a good start for them to stay warm. I'm adding a small dosage of 7 insect dust. Mites is sometimes a problem with these birds, so if you put that in before they get here, they don't know it's even in there, it doesn't bother them, and it prevents them from getting mites. This particular unit wasn't used last year either. I only know it mainly because there's tape on the front of most of the ones that haven't been used. Now this one didn't have the tape on it, but I looked inside and there was nothing inside that would indicate that it was used last year. Now this one was occupied last year, and I failed to take the debris out or the material out from last year's nest, which I just did there. I simply just add the 7 dust to all these, and then here I am stuffing it full of pine needles. Like I said, it's more like a bedding and a way for them to stay warm in the early weeks of the season when sometimes Indiana will dip below freezing. These birds come from Brazil, so they're not used to having too many cold nights. So you probably are wondering why I'm taping the front of the entrances of the gourds at this point when I'm trying to attract birds to the gourds. So there's always a scout bird that comes earlier in the year, kind of looks around for homes, and normally I can see that bird, or I see that bird flying around or making noise, and I know they're here. So normally what I do is I open up 1 or 2 gourds at that point. The reason why only 1 or 2, because I don't want sparrows or other birds that I don't want nesting in these homes until the purple martins have a chance to film themselves. So I'm preventing other birds, non-purple martins, to not nest in this home. And then once the martins get here, then they kind of just take over, and no one wants to be around them because they're loud, and they kind of keep together as a colony in a pack. So I've got all the gourds done at this point. They've all been sealed up, and I've got the 7 dust, and they all got pine needles. And now I'm moving on to the house. You can see I have cedar trays that I made for the houses. It keeps them drier and warmer, and insects normally don't like cedar, so it's a perfect fit. It's almost like a tray for them. I do the same thing I do with the gourds. I stuff the compartments full of pine needles. Same process, really. The birds seem to like the pine needles for some reason. Soft and insulation, it's nice. Now once I get these 2 compartments done, I'll show you, I have another section of the house here that has a different type of tray. So like I've told you in the beginning of the video, that I like to try different ways of doing things, and I'll show you what that tray looks like here in a minute. I'm simply turning around these boxes so it blocks the entrances. Same thing I do with tape. The only difference is I don't need to use tape because the wood actually prevents anything from coming inside. And you can see those ones are already set up that way. This is the other tray I was talking about. This has a small wall with a circle. Some birds may like this particular tray. I've got 2 of these actually. The rest are all just your traditional trays. Still, I had a nesting there 3 or 4 years ago, maybe 3 years ago, my last year at my last house, and it had six babies in that little compartment. So I'm sticking with it just to give them a different type of home, something they may like over something else. Here's another basic tray. It's a pretty exciting hobby, and definitely, like I said, it's challenging. Hoping to have at least 5 to 6 to 7 pairs of martins and maybe 30 babies this year. So plan on bringing you along the way. I'll give you updates on what's happening with the purple martins. And if you could, please subscribe to my videos. Share with your friends and family. And like I always say, I appreciate you spending time with the HomePro Hero.